The afternoon sunlight filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting amber stripes across the mahogany desk in Frank Sinatra's private study. It was June 2003, 5 years after his death, and the estate was finally being catalogued, drawer by drawer, memory by memory. Maria Castellano, a young archivist from Sotheby's, had been assigned to document the personal effects. She'd spent 3 days photographing gold records, framed photographs with presidents, handwritten lyrics on cocktail napkins, the glamorous detritus of an extraordinary life. But this drawer was different. It was the bottom left drawer of Sinatra's writing desk, the kind with a small brass lock that had long since corroded. When Maria pulled it open, expecting more contracts or fan letters, she found instead a single envelope, yellowed with age, sealed but never addressed. The paper felt different in her hands, not the expensive stationery of a celebrity, but cheap hotel paper, the kind with a water-stained logo barely visible in the corner. Desert Inn, Las Vegas, it read, in faded Art Deco script. Maria turned the envelope over. No address, no name. Just Frank Sinatra's unmistakable handwriting across the back flap. Never opened, never sent, never forgotten. FS. Her hands began to tremble. She knew, the way archivists and historians sometimes know, that she was holding something significant, something private, something that was never meant to be found. The envelope smelled of age, of cigarette smoke absorbed into paper fibers over decades, of time itself, crystallized and preserved. Inside, folded once, was a letter, 2 pages, blue ink. The handwriting started neat and controlled, then gradually loosened, became more desperate, more raw. It was dated November 17th, 1952, 3:47 a.m. Maria began to read, and as she did, tears formed in her eyes, not because the words were sad, though they were, but because they were so nakedly human, so vulnerable, so utterly unlike the confident swagger of the man the world knew as Frank Sinatra. This was a confession, a breakdown on paper, a moment when the armor cracked completely. Why did he write it? And why, in God's name, did he keep it hidden for 46 years?
November 17th, 1952, Las Vegas, the Desert Inn. Frank Sinatra sat alone in a hotel room that smelled of stale air conditioning and someone else's cologne. His tuxedo jacket hung crooked on a chair. His bow tie lay on the floor where he'd thrown it. A half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels sat on the nightstand next to an overflowing ashtray. He was 36 years old, and he was finished. That night's performance had been a disaster. His voice, that golden instrument that had made teenage girls faint and strong men weep, had cracked on the second song. Actually cracked, like a teenage boy going through puberty. The audience had been polite at first, then uncomfortable. Then some had started leaving, walking out during "I've Got You Under My Skin," walking out on Frank Sinatra. The newspapers would destroy him tomorrow. They'd been circling for months, waiting for proof that the rumors were true. Frank's voice was gone. His marriage to Ava was collapsing. His record label had dropped him. The Bobby Soxers who'd once screamed for him were now screaming for younger singers. Frank was yesterday's news. He lit another cigarette with shaking hands, took a long drink straight from the bottle, and stared at his reflection in the darkened television screen. Who was that man staring back? Not Frank Sinatra. Not old blue eyes. Just a failure in an expensive suit. The phone rang twice, but he didn't answer. Probably his manager, or Ava calling to fight. Or worse, not calling at all. He pulled open the desk drawer, searching for nothing in particular, and found hotel stationery, cheap paper with the Desert Inn logo. He'd stayed at this hotel dozens of times during better years. Frank pulled out a single sheet, uncapped his fountain pen, and began to write. Not to the press, not to his fans, not even to himself. He wrote to the one person who might understand. The one person who'd known him before the fame, before the money, before the name Frank Sinatra meant anything at all. He wrote to his mother. "Dear Ma," the letter began. And then Frank Sinatra, who'd sung for presidents and kings, who'd commanded stages around the world, who'd never shown weakness to anyone, began to pour out his heart. The letter Maria held in her hands 5 decades later contained words Frank Sinatra never spoke aloud, words he couldn't speak, words that would have shattered the image he'd spent years building. The first page was almost unbearable to read. "Ma, I think I'm done. Not just the singing. I mean done. Finished. Everything I built is falling apart and I don't know how to stop it. Tonight my voice cracked in front of 500 people and I saw them looking at me like I was a has-been, like I was pathetic. Maybe I am." Further down the page, the handwriting grew less controlled. "I've made so many mistakes. I left Nancy. I hurt the kids. I chased Ava and she's destroying me, but I can't stop loving her. I can't eat, can't sleep, can't sing anymore. What's Frank Sinatra if he can't sing? Just another Italian kid from Hoboken who got lucky once." Then, near the bottom of the first page, a line that broke through decades like a knife. "Remember when I was 7 and I sang at that club for nickels? You told me I had a gift, that God gave me something special and I had to take care of it. Ma, I think I broke it. I think I broke the gift." The second page was even harder to read. The ink had run in places, water damage, or maybe tears. "I'm scared, Ma. I'm 36 years old and I'm terrified. What if this is it? What if I never sing again? What if everyone forgets me? What if Ava leaves? What if I end up back in Hoboken working the docks like Pop wanted, and everyone says, 'Remember that Sinatra kid who thought he was going to be somebody?'" Near the end, Frank had written something, then crossed it out so violently the pen had torn through the paper. Maria couldn't read what it said. But the final paragraph was clear. "I'm writing this at 3 in the morning because I can't sleep, and I'm alone, and I'm tired, Ma. So tired. I don't know if I have another comeback in me. I don't know if I want to fight anymore. I just wanted you to know, if it all ends tomorrow, that I tried. I really tried. And I'm sorry I wasn't the son you wanted me to be. I'm sorry I couldn't keep it together. I love you." To understand why Frank wrote that letter, you have to go back to Hoboken, New Jersey, 1923. Back to a skinny Italian kid with oversized ears and a voice that hadn't broken yet. Frank's father, Marty, was a fireman and a boxer. Tough, silent. The kind of man who communicated with his fists and his expectations. He wanted Frank to be a man's man. Work with your hands, keep your head down. Marry a nice Italian girl and have kids. But Frank's mother, Dolly, was different. She was a force of nature, a political organizer, a midwife, a woman who ran their neighborhood like a benevolent dictator. And she saw something in her son that Marty didn't. She heard him sing. It was at a local club when Frank was 9 years old. Some musician had offered to let him sing a song for tips. Frank stepped up on that stage, scared, skinny, shaking, and opened his mouth. The room went quiet. That's the thing people don't understand about great singers. It's not just the voice. It's what happens to a room when they sing. The oxygen changes. Time slows down. Everyone stops whatever they were doing and listens. Frank sang "My Buddy," and grown men cried into their beers. Afterward, Dolly grabbed his face with both hands. "Francis, you got something. You got a gift from God. Don't you dare waste it." From that moment, Frank carried a weight he never asked for. The weight of a gift. The weight of potential. The weight of his mother's dreams. When he became a teenager, he started singing with local bands. When he was 20, he got his first real gig with Harry James. By 24, he was singing with Tommy Dorsey's orchestra, and girls were screaming his name. By 28, he was the biggest star in America. But fame is a trap. It looks like freedom, money, power, adoration. But it's actually a prison built from expectations. Every time Frank stepped on stage, he was expected to be perfect, to hit every note, to make every woman in the audience fall in love with him, to be Frank Sinatra, the legend, not Francis, the scared kid from Hoboken. And the higher you climb, the further you have to fall. By 1952, Frank had been famous for a decade. He'd married his childhood sweetheart, Nancy, and had 3 children. He'd made movies, sold millions of records, performed for presidents. But he'd also made enemies. He'd left Nancy for Ava Gardner, and the press crucified him for it. He'd gotten into fights with journalists. His ego had grown, his temper had grown, and slowly, quietly, his voice had started to go. The nodes on his vocal cords, caused by years of performing without rest, were getting worse. Some nights he could barely finish a set. And the critics who'd once praised him now wrote gleefully about his decline. By November 1952, Frank had lost his record deal with Columbia. His agent was fielding fewer calls. His movie studio dropped him. And Ava, the woman he'd sacrificed everything for, was spending more time with other men. Frank was drowning, and nobody was throwing him a rope. That's why he wrote the letter. Because the pressure of carrying his mother's gift, of living up to the expectations of millions, of being Frank Sinatra when he just wanted to be Francis, it had finally become too much. Frank stared at the letter for a long time. The words blurred as his eyes filled with tears he wouldn't let fall. 3:47 a.m. The loneliest hour. When every regret feels permanent. When every mistake feels fatal. He folded the pages carefully, slid them into an envelope, held his pen over the address line. All he had to do was write his mother's address. 841 Garden Street, Hoboken. Mail it tomorrow. Let her read it. Let her know that her son, her Francis, was breaking. Maybe she'd call. Maybe she'd tell him it was okay to quit. Maybe she'd give him permission to stop fighting. His hand hovered over the paper. And then the phone rang. Frank jumped. The sound was shocking in the silent room. He stared at the phone on the nightstand like it was a snake. It kept ringing. On the 5th ring, he picked up. "Yeah?" he said, his voice hoarse. "Frank, Jesus, I've been trying to reach you all night." It was Hank Santacola, his manager. Frank almost hung up. "What do you want, Hank?" "It's 4 in the morning." "I know what time it is. Listen, I got a call. Harry Cohn from Columbia Pictures. They're casting From Here to Eternity. There's a part, a supporting role. A soldier named Maggio. It's perfect for you. Frank said nothing. Frank? You there? Hank, they don't want me in pictures anymore, and box office poison, you know that. That's why you gotta fight for this one. This role is different. It's not a singing role, it's acting, real acting. And if you get it, if you nail it, it could change everything. Frank looked at the letter on the desk, the sealed envelope, his confession, his surrender. I don't know if I have a fight left in me, Hank. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Hank's voice, quieter. Then find one. Because this is it, Frank. This is the last shot. The line went dead. Frank sat there. Phone in one hand, letter in the other. Two choices. Mail the letter, admit defeat, go home, or take the shot. Risk another failure, risk more humiliation. He looked at the letter, at his mother's name, unwritten, at his confession, sealed. And slowly, carefully, Frank Sinatra opened the desk drawer and placed the letter inside. Not in the trash, not in his suitcase to mail later. In the drawer. Because something had shifted. That phone call, whether it was fate or coincidence or divine intervention, had interrupted his surrender. And Frank Sinatra, who'd never known when to quit, decided not to quit after all.
Why didn't Frank send the letter? Why keep it? The answer isn't simple, and maybe Frank himself didn't fully know. Perhaps it was pride. Frank Sinatra didn't admit weakness, not to the press, not to his rivals, and certainly not to his mother, who'd always believed in him. To send that letter would be to confirm what the newspapers were saying, that he was finished, that the gift was broken. Perhaps it was shame. Frank had left his wife and children for Ava Gardner. He'd alienated friends. He'd burned bridges. The man described in that letter, scared, vulnerable, drowning, that wasn't the man Frank wanted to be, and showing that version to anyone, even his mother, felt like betraying himself. Perhaps it was hope. By not mailing the letter, Frank could pretend he'd never written it, could pretend he'd never been that close to the edge, could keep fighting without admitting how close he'd come to surrender. Or perhaps, and this might be closest to the truth, Frank kept the letter as a reminder of the night he almost quit, a reminder that rock bottom looks like a hotel room at 4 a.m. with an empty bottle and a full ashtray. A reminder that the difference between failure and comeback is sometimes just a phone call, a moment, a choice. So he kept it, tucked it away in a drawer, and never looked at it again. But he never forgot it existed. What happened next became legend. Frank flew to Hollywood, begged Harry Cohn for an audition, offered to do the role of Maggio for almost nothing, $8,000, a fraction of his usual fee. The studio didn't want him. They thought he was too old, too washed up, too much of a headache. But Frank fought. And eventually, through a combination of persistence, talent, and, according to some stories, help from powerful friends, he got the role. From Here to Eternity began filming in March 1953. And something magical happened on that set.
Decades passed. Frank remarried, divorced, remarried again, made more albums, more movies, became a legend not just of music, but of American culture itself. But late at night, in his private study, when the house was quiet and the whiskey was poured, Frank would sometimes open that bottom drawer. He never opened the letter, never read it again, but he'd touch the envelope, feel the weight of it. Remember the night he almost quit. In 1997, his health failing, memory slipping, Frank made a final notation on the back of the envelope. Never opened, never sent, never forgotten. F.S. It was his way of leaving a message, to whoever found it, to history. This happened. I was here. I almost fell, but I didn't.
Some words define us, not because we speak them, but because we carry them. Frank Sinatra carried that letter for 46 years. It was a secret he kept from the world, from his wives, from his children, from the millions of fans who thought they knew him. But it was real. And in its reality, it tells us something more honest than any magazine interview or authorized biography ever could. It tells us that Frank Sinatra, the legend, the icon, the chairman of the board, was human. That he doubted himself. That he came within a phone call of giving up. And that's not a weakness. That's the most powerful part of his story. Because how many of us have written letters we never sent? Not literally, perhaps, but emotionally. How many times have we wanted to tell someone, a parent, a spouse, a friend, that we're scared, that we're failing, that we don't know if we can keep going? But we don't send those letters. We seal them. We hide them. We carry them. And somehow we keep going. That's what Frank's letter teaches us. That the moment of doubt doesn't define you. The surrender you almost committed doesn't erase the comeback you actually achieved. Frank Sinatra almost quit on November 17, 1952. But he didn't. He fought through the worst years of his life and emerged with his greatest work still ahead of him. The albums he recorded after 1952, In the Wee Small Hours of the Morning, Songs for Swingin' Lovers, Only the Lonely, those weren't made by a man who'd never suffered. They were made by a man who'd looked into the abyss and decided to climb back out. You can hear it in every note, every pause, every breath. That's the sound of survival. And the letter? The letter stayed in the drawer, a ghost, a memory, a testament to the night Frank Sinatra almost stopped being Frank Sinatra. But also a testament to the morning after, when he woke up, when he fought, when he sang again. If we could write back to Frank, across the decades, across the silence, what would we say? Maybe this. Dear Francis, we found your letter, the one you wrote at 3:47 a.m. in a Las Vegas hotel room when you thought you were finished. We want you to know you weren't finished. You were just beginning. The songs you sang after that night, after you chose not to mail the letter, those songs changed music forever, changed lives, gave people permission to feel, to hurt, to survive. You thought your gift was broken, but it wasn't. It was being refined. The young Sinatra sang about love. The reborn Sinatra sang about life. Thank you for not sending the letter. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for showing us that rock bottom isn't the end. It's the foundation of the comeback. Thank you for staying. Everyone who heard you sing. The sound of a needle dropping on vinyl, in the wee small hours of the morning, begins to play. Soft, sad, hopeful. The sound of a man who survived.